Because when I first came here, it was like, I just had no idea what to expect. Like some people said, oh, it's like really dangerous to cycle on the roads, like you can't go on your own, like you must do everything in a group. And then one day I missed the group ride, so I just went out on my own. It was absolutely fine. And I was like, you know what? So I just kept going further and further, and then ended up exploring it all basically on my own. And all of my friends were like, oh my God, like you're going on your own. And it's fine. But it's not fine. The risk is a lot less than I perceived it to be. Basically I want to make a video talking all about that and about all the routes and like all the safety tips, and want some good footage for it, so it's gonna slap.
And now I'm flying high into the sky above it all. It's nothing like I've ever experienced.
How are we all? If you're new here, hi, I'm Laura. I am a cyclist and a creator from the UK, and I have just got back from the most incredible month of my life, exploring Cape Town on my bike. I went completely on my own, on a bit of a whim, and I recently started this channel to kind of document my slightly chaotic life, make cinematic vlogs. But I was thinking that before I got on this trip, I really struggled to find information about what it was like to cycle in Cape Town, how to stay safe. So this is the video that I wish I had before I went. Cycling in Cape Town 101. I'm going to go over everything you need to know. The weather, including the wind, where to stay, the prices, how to stay safe, especially if you're on your own and you're a woman, the routes to go on, specific areas to avoid for safety reasons, how to find friends and groups to cycle with, and obviously all of the cafes that you have to stop at. It is all going to be interlaced with some pretty sexy footage of cycling in Cape Town. Okay, so starting off with a pretty quick one, the weather. So obviously Cape Town is in the Southern Hemisphere, so they have the summer at the same time as Australia, the opposite to the UK. So it is pretty hot from like November to March time, and in my opinion it is the perfect way to use your annual leave in January. I went in February. It was like 25 to 30 degrees every day, but the only thing you have to worry about is the wind. So Cape Town summers are windy, like being blown off your bike 70-mile-an-hour gusts windy. In my experience, around 25% of the days the wind made it completely unrideable. 25% of the days it was like not super pleasant, but then 50% of the days were like absolutely fine. There is an app you can use called Windy to check the actual wind when you're there, because it was much better than Apple weather, so definitely recommend that. Okay, so where to stay? So this is central Cape Town. You can see that it's divided by the mountains. So it's divided by Signal Hill and kind of by Table Mountain. On the right you have like the city centre, busy like high rise, and then on the left you've got Green Point and Sea Point. Now you can stay in the city, like I did stay there for one night, but I'd say if you can stay on the other side of the mountain, to stay in Sea Point and Green Point. These are like the kind of walkable restaurant cafe areas. They're super nice. They are a bit more expensive, but I do think like super worth it. So I would recommend staying there. So then how expensive is Cape Town? So I guess there's like two buckets here. I think there's the accommodation and then like food. So within accommodation there's definitely a range like everywhere. I'd say the cheapest you could probably get was like a hostel for maybe like £15 a night. Then maybe your next option would be staying in a room in someone's house on Airbnb for like £20-25 a night. And then if you want like your own sort of studio or like small flat, you're looking at more like £50 to £60 a night. That was when I stayed. That was in like Sea Point and Green Point area. You could probably get cheaper, you could probably get more expensive, but I'd say like £50-60 a night was probably about the average if you were going for Airbnbs. And then food is a slightly weird one. So I found that eating out was actually a lot cheaper than like the UK and Europe. So a coffee would cost you like £1.50, £2. Same as a pastry, you could get like a lunch meal for £5, whereas then groceries were about the same price as the UK, which is kind of driven by the different like labour costs, but it's definitely like super affordable if you're coming from the UK. Like you can live a really nice lifestyle, especially if you're on like a UK salary. And to be honest, the prices of things did kind of make me fall in love with the place. So hopefully that kind of helps with your budgeting. Okay, so on to the actual cycling. So number one is safety. So like I said in the intro, loads of people said that when I came to Cape Town, like I wouldn't be able to cycle on my own, which made me super apprehensive about going, and to be honest was kind of putting me off because I love my independence. Like I love to explore things on my own. But having been, it is honestly fine. There is always a risk wherever you go, and I'd say the risk in Cape Town is slightly higher, but there are so many things you can do to like reduce your risk. I never had any issues. I'd never heard of anyone else personally having issues, but definitely like follow these tips if you want to stay super safe. The whole kind of safety aspect actually comes from South Africa being the most like economically unequal place in the world. There are people who live in like mansions in Camps Bay, whilst there are like huge populations of people that live unemployed in kind of like unofficial settlements, and basically the theft crime rate is pretty high. So I've got 5 top tips for staying safe. So number one is to just insure all of your valuables. So I'd say your phone and your bike, if you're taking it, would be the main ones. I'd say other things you might want to think about are like your Garmin watch, your Garmin computer, or like cameras. That would definitely just give you a bit of extra peace of mind. Number 2 would be to ride at busy times. So like early mornings before work or weekends. And then if you can, like find a group of people, either like tag onto groups or like go to arranged group rides or arrange to meet up with other people. And I've got an entire section on how you can find those people in a minute. Number 3, share your location with someone. So my mum was constantly tracking my iPhone, and I also had an air tag on my actual bike. So if like one of them was stolen, my mum would be able to track it, or she'd just be able to see if like something looked a bit off. 4th would be to carry like a pepper spray or an alarm. So I carried this like just personal alarm that if you pull it, it makes a really loud noise, which I never had to use, but I was kind of hoping that it would just scare someone off. But a lot of locals do carry pepper spray around, so you might want to consider that. And then finally, just know your route, like load it onto your Garmin to make sure that you don't end up in areas that could be slightly less safe for cyclists. Okay, routes. So I had no idea where to cycle when I first got here. So this is a map of Cape Town. If you're starting in the city centre, every route goes along the coast. I wouldn't really recommend going west unless like you're going with a group of locals and they've suggested it or something. Pretty much everything goes east. So the classic route that a lot of the group rides do is that they go along the coast up to a place called Llandudno, which is like one longish steady climb, and then they come back. And that is about 40k. You can do it before work. It's kind of just like the go-to thing. And if you keep going, you go down the other side of Llandudno. It's called like Sukabosi or something, but I always say it wrong. And you go into a place called Hout Bay, which is delightful. Like I actually stayed there for a bit because I loved it so much. It's super like chill, surfy, like spiritual vibes, obsessed. And this is how you get to the thing called Chapman's Peak, which people refer to as Chappies. And it is like the iconic climb. It's like just under 5Ks at like 4 or 5% average gradient. And it is bloody delightful. This is the view from the top, and you will see so many cyclists going up and down here. Note that when I was there, it was actually closed on a Wednesday between like 10 and 4. So maybe just bear that in mind. And if you do to the top of Chappies and come back, that would make your whole cycle around like 65Ks. But then again, you could keep going. So if you come down from Chapman's Peak, you come down my favourite descent, I think possibly ever, which is the Noordhoek side of Chapman's Peak. And it is beautiful. You see Noordhoek Beach, like it's just such a nice descent. It's kind of windy. It's stunning. And so you'll come down there and you'll come into Noordhoek itself. Then from Noordhoek, you can do the peninsula. So you can go around it either way. You can go from Noordhoek into Fishhook, then through Simonstown, up the climb called Smitswinkle, then around through Scarborough and then back. Or you can go the other way, so Scarborough, down Smitswinkle and back around. And if you do this back to town, it's about 115k. If you want to add some extra distance to that loop, you can also go into the Cape Point Reserve, which you do have to pay to go in. It's like £17 if you're a foreigner, or like a quarter of that if you're a South African citizen. Highly recommend. It is beautiful. Be aware that it is very exposed, so definitely do it on a day that's not very windy. And I think it probably adds like, I want to say 30k to your whole route. So if you did that as well, I think the whole route would be about 145k, which is not a bad day out if you ask me. And with everything I've just said, you can kind of make up your own routes, go back on yourself. I did like a few climbs, came back, did part of the peninsula, came back, and just kind of made it up as I went along. But there are 3 more kind of routes and climbs that I want to tell you about. So the first one is going up the Glen, Tafelberg Road, I think is how you say it, and then also Signal Hill. So I literally only discovered these on my last day in Cape Town when we did some filming, which I was simultaneously very happy about, but also bummed because they were so incredible and I wish I'd been doing it the whole time I was there. But they are these like pretty sharp climbs with insane views, great to do at sunrise and sunset, and are very accessible from town. The second one is a climb from Noordhoek to Constantia. When I was staying in Hout Bay, I did this 50k loop where I went up Chapman's Peak, down Chapman's Peak, Noordhoek, round back to Constantia, and then back to Hout Bay. You could also go from town, do the loop and come back, but it is a long climb. So if you want to get some elevation, get your legs going, highly recommend. Then my final recommendation is one slightly further out of town called Clarence Drive. It starts from a place called Gordon's Bay, which is about an hour's drive from Cape Town. I definitely recommend driving there because the route to get there isn't super cycle friendly. But once you are there, you can cycle all the way along this beautiful coastline to a place called Betty's Bay. And honestly, just do it. Like, it is so stunning. Like, I only did it because someone recommended it on here. And it makes it about a 65, 70k round trip. You can also go to a place called Hermanus, which is what we did. It ended up being 165k, which is quite a long way. And the bit like beyond Betty's Bay, between there and Hermanus, like isn't that pretty. It's just roads. So like, wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you're a bit of a crazy endurance athlete. So those are the routes that I recommend. You can definitely mix and match. I'm sure there are loads more. So if you want to like drop recommendations in the comments, like feel free to do that. I'm sure it'll be very helpful for people. So then areas to avoid. Before I start listing these 4 areas, I want to preface this by saying like these are not like inherently dangerous places. Like people live there, it's people's homes. Like I don't want to say these are just like danger zones that you should avoid. But just from speaking to locals, I've been a bit of a history of incidents there. It was kind of the done thing to do these places with other people or to just avoid them. So use this information as you wish. The first area is just generally the city and specifically a place called Woodstock. So a lot of people cycle around here. Like I cycled through here alone. A lot of people live in Woodstock and so they're cycling there a lot. But it was definitely the done thing to do to cycle with other people, especially if you're going to be like early mornings in the dark. Like arrange to meet a group, try and find other people to go with if you have to go to the city or to Woodstock. Or as I'll touch on in my next part, like if you're going to meet a group ride, you can actually meet it just further along rather than having to go into the city and then turn back on yourself. So that's the first place. Second area is this road in Hout Bay, which I was told to use the road parallel to it if I had to go down there. Third is this area of the peninsula route between Noordhoek and Kommetjie. If you have to do that bit on your own, like I'd have your wits about you, try and cycle quickly. Like I did see people on their own, but again, I'd just try and do it with someone else. And then finally, there's an area between Muizenberg and Gordons Bay that I would definitely avoid. And this is why I said the drive to Gordons Bay. So those are the 4 areas that I think should be on your radar. Maybe there's more, please drop them in the comments. And this is all just from my experience and from like chatting to locals. Okay, so group rides. As much as I loved cycling on my own in Cape Town, cycling is just so much better with friends. So here is the list of the morning rides that I know about. They usually just do the route along the coast that I talked about up to Llandudno or sometimes Chapman's Peak. And I'll put their Instagrams here. So I definitely just like DM them or like check their Instagram to make sure that the rides are happening before you go. That will always be the best place to get the most up-to-date info. So on Tuesdays, there are 2 rides. There is this Nana cycling group, which is a female-only group. That's ride starts, I think, 6 a.m. from Greenpoint. Or there's Team Pure Savage, which is a very fast ride. I think they leave a bit earlier, but they are very good cyclists. So if you're into your performance, then definitely go with them. Wednesdays, there is the Chia Vita ride, which I became a bit of a regular at, even though I was only there for a month. They're all lovely. And they leave from their HQ in Woodstock at 6 a.m. So I would actually meet them along the coast in Sea Point at like 6:20, just so I didn't have to cycle to Woodstock on my own. But then I'd go back with the group for coffee and then cycle in the daylight back through Woodstock and was completely fine. Thursdays, this might have to be fact checked. I think Ollie's/the Clubhouse does a ride. I never went. I never actually saw it. But it might be worth messaging them on Instagram to see if they've got any rides coming up or if they're on different days. And then finally, Fridays, East City Cycles does a ride that leaves at 5:30 a.m. from their shop in the city. Again, wouldn't go there on your own in the morning. And then if you go to these groups, like just make some friends, chat to people riding. People will be riding at the weekends, so you can always see if you can tag onto a ride where people might be going a bit further. And everyone is lovely. Like the Cape Town cycling community is like nothing else. And also just feel free to DM me on Instagram if you want any contacts or any tips. Okay, and then last but not least, cafe. So this is my favorite part of cycling, obviously. There were so many that I didn't get to try, but here is my list. So in Greenpoint, Jason's Bakery, great. Sea Point, you've got Ollie's/the Clubhouse, Potato Bakery, Naked, which is great for brunch, Arthur's Mini Super, Maggie Lou's, and then Bootlegger, which is a chain. In Hout Bay, Southeaster Bakery, huge shout out, my favourite possibly bakery ever. It's just, food is great. They have like focaccia sandwiches, great pastries, great coffee, like really spacious garden, like it's just my favourite place in the world. Then in Noordhoek, there's a place called Noordhoek Farm Village, which has a bunch of places. I went to this place called The Roost, which was nice. Then in Simonstown, there is the Lighthouse Cafe and Think Coffee right next door to each other. And then in Scarborough, you've got a place called The Village Hub, which is super cute. And there's also a restaurant next door called Camel Rock if you want like more significant food. Okay, actually, no, the final thing is Cape Town Cycle Tour. So there is this big cycling race that happens. It's just over 100k. I think it must be every March, where like they close all the roads and do this incredible event. And I literally just missed it and I had to go home. But I highly recommend staying for the cycle tour. It is such a huge event. It looked incredible and I will be there next year. So if you're also there, let me know. And that is it. That is everything I know about cycling in Cape Town. I hope that is useful. I'm going to link a bunch of things in the description and I'm sure that I have missed stuff. So please leave a comment if you've got any tips or recs. And yeah, let me know if you're ever in London or, to be honest, in like Europe this summer or back in Cape Town. I think I'm going to be back in like October, November time, hopefully for like 5-6 months. Because it is one of my favourite places in the world now. So let me know if you're also cycling. And I'll see you in my next cinematic vlog about couch surfing in London before I go back travelling in Europe in 6 weeks' time. So I will see you then.